I want to present to our auditory my old friend Yaqub Zaki. He's a famous ideologue of the political Islam living in the Great Britain, and when we meet, we discuss all the problems concerning the development of political Islam with him. I think it's the most brilliant man I ever met in my life. So we shall talk now about what is happening in the Middle East the last 5 years. Dear Yaqub, what do you think about really all these events that perturbs so much the actual population of the earth, the challenging events, the striking videos, the creation of coalitions, 6 and more states against one very small quasi-state, as they say, pseudo-state, and so on. And what do you think about the possibility to really win the status of a political subject through the utmost effort, victims, violence, and so on, like it were in the past time, in the historical times of the early Islam? Because the early Islam has established itself also not through the mahabba, but rather through the heroism of Sahaba. And I remember that in Johannesburg, or maybe it was Cape Town, you said that you are tired when all around you repeat that we are 1.5 billion people and so on, and you said that 5,000 who were with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were pure gold, because they took all over the world, and this 1.5 billion now actually present Muslims who only wail and always are victims. Yes,
victimhood, luxuriating in victimhood, like the Jews.
They are nothing but trash.
Dross.
The hard words. They shocked many present people around us, but I remember it until now, and I think that maybe the latest events somehow influenced you in the other direction. So maybe you begin to think that all is not as bad as it seemed 15 years or 20 years ago.
No, in fact, I think it is worse. Yes. But I'm glad that you began with the example of Rasulullah and the Sahaba, because in the space of a few years, particularly during the Khilafah of Umar ibn al-Khattab, Islam achieved the destruction of 2 world empires. The overthrow of the Parthian Empire, which the Romans and the Byzantines had been trying to do for about 600 years and never achieved. The Muslims achieved it in 1 day at Qadisiyah. 2 days. The battle lasted 2 days. This is something that verges on the miraculous, and it points to something that cannot be explained in materialistic terms: the possibility of a divine hand, divine intervention in history at key moments of history. Another key moment in modern history could be the Islamic Revolution in Iran, which took almost everybody by surprise. Not entirely everybody, because you only needed to have one Iranian friend to know what was happening in Iran under the Shah and his American backers. Now, as somebody from the Soviet Union, you're well aware of the activities of the KGB. But the KGB, they were children compared to Savak. And the crimes of the KGB are trifles compared to what was happening in Iran. So it was inevitable that a revolution would overthrow this wicked system and its American sponsors. So from the outset, in '79, although I'm just an ordinary Sunni, I hailed the revolution in Iran. I was the first person to support it in Britain with an article in The Guardian, and that was at the time of the hostage crisis, when, you know, the staff of the American embassy in Tehran were being held hostages, and the whole of America and her European satrapies, of which my country, Britain, formerly Great Britain, now insignificant nothing Britain, is one. This article attracted a lot of attention, both positive and negative, but mainly hostile. Then, a few years later, again, one of those extraordinary coincidences, Salman Rushdie is commissioned to write a book against Islam. And when his publishers, who were Zionists, approached him with this proposal, he said, "I only write novels." And they said to him, "Then cast it in the form of a novel." And that is when all this blasphemy about the Rasulullah came out in his book. And at that time, I published 2 articles in the Times, which again attracted a great deal of attention, so that I was seen as an apologist for the Khomeini regime. However, my opinion about the Islamic revolution is that it is significant as a paradigm that can be copied by other Muslim countries and societies, because its relevance to our situation is only partial. If you take the country that we are in at this moment, Turkey, there has been another Islamic revival in Turkey, not a bloody one like in Iran, but a pacific one, but nevertheless it is just as significant. Now, a few years ago, I was invited to give the Shab-i Arus address at the Necmettin Erbakan University in Konya, and I said that I thought that there are only 3 Muslim countries with even an approximation to good government. One was Malaysia, another Iran, and the third one, the country we are in, Turkey. I said Malaysia is peripheral. It is marginal both to Islamic geography and Islamic history. There is no way it could aspire to leadership of the Muslim world. Now, Iran, by contrast, is not marginal to Islamic geography or history. In fact, it is absolutely central. But the problem with Iran is that it is a Shi'i country since the time of his accession of Shah Ismail Safavi in 1501, and the government lies in the hands of the mullahs, some of them fanatical mullahs of Qom, and since 82% of all Muslims are Sunni, they will never accept the leadership of Iran. This leaves only Turkey, which had a very unhappy history in the first part of the 20th century, in which people, Muslims from other countries, just wrote Turkey off. I remember an incident I had in New Delhi in 1975. I had been here in Turkey filming, and then we drove with our camera team. I was not the director. The director was well-known documentary director Stephen Cross. I was merely his assistant. Then we drove all through Turkey, filming as we went, until we crossed the Iranian frontier, and gave me an opportunity to compare these two societies, the Turkish and the Iranian. And when we flew from Tehran to Delhi to continue filming in India, I was with Mr. Ausaf Ali, who is the Vice Chancellor of the Hamdard University in New Delhi. And he was there with an Indian mullah, whose name I cannot remember. And I was talking about my experiences in Turkey. And I said, I think that the future of Islam now lies either in Europe or with Turkey. And I expect the Islamic revival to begin in Turkey. I was wrong, of course, because the Islamic revival began with the overthrow of the Shah in Tehran in '79. I don't know Urdu. This was translated by Ausaf Ali, the Vice Chancellor of the Hamdard University, into Urdu for the benefit of the mullah. The mullah answered him, which of course I didn't understand, not knowing Urdu. And then Ausaf Ali turned to me and said, Maulana so-and-so is very astonished that you should think that the Islamic revival will take place in Turkey. Because this people had the idea of Turkey as a country that had been totally alienated from Islam by Ataturk and Inanu, and as anti-Islamic as if it were almost a communist country. And he said, then why do you think Turkey? And I said, because I have perceived in Turkish society, and I've been coming here to Turkey since 1971, certain trends that augur well for the future. And he said, what are they? And I said, well, the two principal trends that I perceived is, one, the underground strength of the Tariqa, which applies also to the Caucasus and to Central Asia. Because you know, in Tajikistan, latterly, there were only 18 Masajid Amala, that is the communist jargon, working mosques, which is nothing for a country of 5 million people. But there were 1,800 underground mosques, which were chaykhanas that doubled as mosques. So this was, again, the underground strength of the Tariqa. I perceived that here in Turkey. And they said, what else did you perceive that makes you so optimistic of the future of Turkey? And I said, well, nations degenerate over time. The Italians are not the people of the Renaissance, and the people of the Renaissance were not the people of ancient Rome, when Rome ruled the known world. When we look at Italy's pitiful performance in the Second World War, contrast it with Germany, but also contrast it with ancient Rome. And this applies to a lot of countries. Sometimes I think it applies to my own country, to Scotland. Look at this referendum business. The people who voted no against the independence of Scotland exceeded by 10%. We came near to winning, but the 10% difference was decisive. So can this really, Scotland, can it really be the country of Braveheart, of Sir William Wallace? I think no. It is the country now of Coward Heart. Because it's not that people did not want independence from England, because between the English and the Scots there is deep-seated hatred, but because they were afraid of being on their own, of being alone, after 300 years of colonial rule. They were afraid. Now, many nations deteriorate over time, and when a people become degenerate, it is very difficult to climb back. But the Turks, the odd thing about them is that the Turkish national character has not changed in centuries. The Turks are still a brave people with a great gift for warfare, which you see, for instance, in the Korean War. Do you know how many Americans defected to communism in the POW camps in North Korea? Half of them. But in the Turkish POW camps, not one Turk became a communist. And the reasons for this are twofold. One is that the hierarchical structure of the Turkish army, that's to say the officer corps, remained intact. So there was authority inside these camps. And the other is the deen, the Turks' national attachment to Islam. Because the Turkish role in the history of Islam has been phenomenal. It seems that at one time, if we examine Islamic history and its and the course of its development, it seems that at one time the racial potential of the Arab nation was exhausted, and the leadership role of Islam was taken over by the Turks. We look at the origins of the Turks as a very tough people riding those little Mongolian horses from Central Asia and sweeping all over the world. That from the obscurity of Central Asia, the Turks fanned out in two directions, east and southwest. And in doing so, they founded one empire after another. So one significant feature of the Turkish character, wherever you go, the Mughals in India, the Seljuks in Iran and Mesopotamia, the empire of the Lesser Seljuks here in Asia Minor, you find this great state-building capacity of the Turks.
Like the Germans of the East.
Yes.
Because all the aristocracies of Europe were created by the German tribes.
Exactly. Yes. And this is inbuilt capacity, and it is not deteriorated over years. And now it is manifest in the significant revival of Islam in Turkey.
Okay, but close to our days, after you noticed the possibility of Turkey to become a parting point for revival of Islam, what is now about it? What is now about the role of Turkey and the processes going on around Turkey now?
That is very, very difficult to predict. But the really significant changes in the Middle East is the breakdown of the Sykes-Picot system, under which the whole Middle East, the entire Arab world, has been ruled since the end of the First World War. People criticize ISIL, that these ISIL people, they are barbarians, they are a disgrace to Islam, Islam has nothing to do with terrorism. All this is true. But remember, ISIL put their finger on two very important things. One is that there is no legitimacy in the Arab world at all, political legitimacy. Secondly, that the frontiers of these artificial states are unreal. This is the meaning of ISIL, the Islamic state of Iraq and the Levant. In other words, these frontiers, which did not exist under the Ottomans, for instance the British, created Iraq as an artificial state, as a consolation prize for Faisal when he was driven out of Damascus by the French. And they did so by taking 3 wilayats of the Ottoman Empire, putting them together and calling it a state. States are not made that way. States cannot be made by issuing a fiat from a place like Versailles or Lausanne or Sèvres. Countries are made by history. They are made by history acting on race, sometimes acting on religion, and sometimes also acting on a combination of both, like the Japanese nation, in which you have a national religion, Shinto, and the modern Japanese nation is a product of the centuries, the influence of national religion and the basic instinctive characteristics of the Japanese race, a proud people who have never tolerated foreign domination. So that with the collapse of the Sykes-Picot system, we are on the verge of something new that is going to happen in the Middle East. I cannot predict what it is, but what all Muslims are looking for, because the crisis in the Muslim world is essentially a crisis of leadership, that is a revival of the caliphate in some form or another, which would provide us with what we haven't got in confronting the challenges to Islam from Zionism, from American colonialism, from British imperialism, and so on. It is this factor of leadership. Now, in the Muslim world today, there is a crisis of leadership, there is also a crisis of legitimacy, and a crisis of identity. Because since there is no leadership, there is also no political legitimacy. In terms of the Sharia, there is not a trace of legitimacy in any of the Muslim countries today. Now, also that is linked to the question of identity. Since these countries that are the creation of Versailles are artificial states, they are now in the process of disintegration. So what is their real identity? Now, if we look at Islamic history, we see that unlike Europe, loyalties in Islam have always been religious and dynastic, never racial or national. But although this is good, it is complicated by a negative factor that you have clan loyalties, which tend to be divisive in their impact. So what we are witnessing is the collapse of the modern nation state, which now creates a political vacuum, and we're waiting for something else to emerge from that vacuum.
Okay, nation state is collapsed for some time now, because, you know, from my point of view, all countries existing now are divided into two main groups. One upper group is constituted by subject states who
vassal states,
subject
states.
I mean subject as in philosophy, subject and object.
Oh, I see.
Subject meaning they have political will, they are players in some game, but different on the different stages. Like, for example, the United States are the pinnacle of a pyramid, yes. And then we have France and the Great Britain, and then three countries of the third order who want to make an uplifting: Russia, China, and Turkey, who were the former empires and remember it, but their ruling classes are limited by the national borders. And below them, there are national states who are just objects, like, for example, pieces in a chess game.
Yeah.
So it's obvious, but what you have said now, until now, leads to the thought that the initiative made by the organizers of the Islamic State is something transcending the idea of nation state and this division of the artificial states left by the colonialists in the region. So what do you think about the war going on now in the Middle East?
There are various interpretations of this. We have the evidence of both the Bible and the Quran that the latter days may be near at hand. That the advent of the last day, Sa in Arabic, and it's known in Greek as the eschaton. Students of eschatology have remarked, basing themselves on the book of Revelation in the Bible, and the references in the Quran to phenomena like Yaqub and Ma'juj, that the advent of the last day of the eschaton is heralded by tribulation, that is to say, upheaval, disintegration, collapse, anarchy. Many people interpret the present situation in the Middle East as this. These are signals. Ashrat Sa'a is the Arabic phrase, the conditions of the hour, which you recognize in what is happening now in the Middle East. It could be that. It could be that with the collapse of the nation state, which I said is alien to Islam, because the sole concept of nationality that Islam recognizes is the Ummah Muhammadiyah, the nation founded by Muhammad, which is distinguished from the nation state by the fact that the criterion of membership, of citizenship in this state, the criterion is the criterion of belief, the positive act of belief, the affirmation of Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. That act is more important, the positive act of belief is more important than the genetic accident of birth, which is the usual foundation of nation states. So that the artificial nation states that the British and the French created in the Middle East are collapsing. And the question is, what is going to take their place? If it be a reversion to the Ottoman Empire, this is, the Ottoman Empire was multicultural, multi-religious, the Millet system, multilingual. And it was an example of human tolerance to the rest of the world. What has replaced it are these nation states that have no real identity, like the similar states created in Central and Eastern Europe by the victors of both the First and Second World War. Men like President Wilson, who had no knowledge of European history whatever, but he was the most influential man in 1918 in creating these nation states. He even wanted to create one for the Armenians. And for a short time, this state, called Wilsonian Armenia, did exist. Now, fortunately, all this has been superseded by the disintegration of these colonial states, and the question arises, what is to succeed it? And that I cannot prophesy.
Well, but you have...
Done.
You have a rather positive instinct about the Islamic State, or rather negative instinct. What your inner soul, what your intuition says to you about this phenomenon?
I'm not intuitive. I'm not really psychic, and I'm certainly not a prophet. I cannot prophesy the future. I can only reason on the basis of the past.
Yes.
That there is an evolution in history toward an Islamic ideal. And I think that the collapse of communism has created a political vacuum in the world which only Islam can fill.
Well, we expect now the second collapse of the American Empire, which will let us still more freedom and maybe provoke the rise of some new forces we maybe don't imagine about the quality of them. What kind of forces that may be. But I think personally that anyway this is the stage in the development of political Islam. I think that maybe it's a passenger stage that will be transcended and passed over but still it's significant because there are many moments that cannot be explained just by banal, explained away by some banal cliches, by some easygoing formulas about the Secret Service's intrusion and projects of the masters of this world and so on and so on. I think that really it is really a challenge against the modern world, and all these coalitions of 60 and more states collected against this phenomenon, they are just not in vain. This is not a piece of theater. It is a real fear that they manifest. But we witness some more dramatic turn of events around Russia. For example, I don't know for sure, but I take it that through some analytical approach, I take it that Obama gave the order in some form or another to Putin about ousting of Erdogan from power, like a ticket to come back to the partnership with the West. After Ukraine, Putin was seeking for ways to come back and to make himself pardoned by the Western so-called partners. So he came to the General Assembly of the United Nations, where he insisted upon the meeting between him and Obama, who refused first. First of all, he refused, but then he accorded an hour and a half for a meeting. So after that, after Putin came back from this meeting, the intrusion into Syria, according to the demand of Assad, yes, to help him, had begun. I mean that this regiment of mixed regiment of Russian airplanes was transferred to Syria and began its bombing with the rebukes from the Western side, but mild rebukes. You are bombing not the right guys, you are bombing the wrong guys, and so on and so on, but then still we cannot do anything about your bombing the wrong guys or the right guys, so keep bombing. Well, but all this theater, histrionics, we are covering the fact that Russia headed some kind of coalition with purely anti-Turkish intentions. As I see it, Russia became a head of coalition from Iran, Baghdad, Assad, Israel, Hezbollah, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt.
Yes.
That have the main idea to take out Mr. Erdogan from the chess board. Yeah, because Erdogan represents the challenge, very important, very serious challenge to the Western world, to the United States. Why? Russia also represents a challenge, like China, because these three national states, they have the making of empires. They have the memory of empires. They want to come from the third level where they stand, that is, their ruling classes are eating from their rent natural rent from their population inside their borders. They want to come to the second level, where the Great Britain and France are existing, where ruling classes are eating from the former empires, from the part of the world. They are beyond their national limits. And certainly the United States are eating from the whole world, because they export their dollar, their paper dollar, to all the countries making the international trade and so on. So they want to become the states of the empires of the second order. But the trick is the world order cannot accept any uplifting, only downlifting. You can go from the second level, like the Soviet Union, to the third, becoming Russia. You may come from the third level, like the German Reich, to the non-existing status, to the state object, like Germany, yes, after the war. But you cannot make an uplifting by becoming from the third world. Reich had an intention to become from the third level state, the second level. Yes, Japan also. But they had lost, and they became the state objects.
Became vassal states.
Vassal states without sovereignty.
Yes.
Yes, but you cannot show me an example of a state that was third degree and became second degree or first degree. Beside the United States, but it's a special example. It's the situation of creating the liberal club, the global liberal club, during two wars, when the traditionalist society was rejected behind the scene. Yes.
The key factor in the history of the United States is the American Civil War, because this saw the extinction of a class that had always existed in Europe, from which the leadership cadres of Western civilization were drawn, namely aristocracy. And there was an aristocracy of sorts in America down to 1864. But with the extinction of the plantation aristocracy, the destiny of the country fell into the hands of the bankers and the industrialists, creating the monstrous phenomenon of contemporary America, dominating the rest of the world and exporting its anti-spiritual materialistic values.
So the question is, 3 third-degree countries now want to uplift their existential order at the same time: Russia, Turkey, and China. What should the first-degree country like the United States do in that occasion? Obviously, to collide them one to another. Yes, like for example, China, it is difficult because China has its own unpredictable policy. But Turkey and Russia, this is possible because Russian politics are absolutely free from any ideology, from any intellectual burden, so to say. It is ruled only by the pure ambition, anti-intellectual ambition, to become one of the big ones, to
join the club,
to be in the wolf pack, so to say, or to run with the wolves. This is the super idea, and when the political class has such a simple idea to become one of the big ones at any price, it is easily manipulated. They tried to solve the problem by taking Crimea, and they were wrapped on hands. Yes, and after that, they were proposed to do some job for Uncle Sam, that is to eliminate Turkey. Turkey has its own Crimea, it's Syria, and has its own project instead of Russian world. It's the Neo-Ottoman project, yes, like China has its new Silk Way and its own Crimea in the in the form of Taiwan, yes. Mm-hmm. So it is inevitable that all of them will be put against one another in the beginning of the Third World War. So I think this attitude, this approach explains almost everything we see now. Why Erdogan downed a Russian bomber? He made a step to prevent the soft and inevitable development of events. Like, for example, what Russia intended to do. Soft surrounding, soft taking by the throat. Syrian Kurds attacking terrorist acts inside Turkey, and then maybe Gezi Meydan one another, and then army makes a coup d'etat. Well, and the question is solved. But by downing the bomber, Erdogan takes the initiative, because now if something is happening inside Turkey, like terrorist acts, explosions and so on, the accusing finger shows in the direction of Russia. Before that, if no bomber is downed, well, terrorist acts, because it is just so. Well, no perpetrator is known. Yes, no criminal is known behind these terrorist acts, and in such cases, it is always the government who is guilty. Yeah, but now the guilt is quite evident. It's Russia with its revenge for the bomber. So Erdogan becomes the hero, the leader, and Russia is the opposing force demanding the mobilization of the national forces. Yeah?
Well, I'm interested in the possible alignment of forces that would precipitate a Third World War. Now, you said that with the collapse of communism, Russia has become an ideology-free country. In that case, it resembles America. Both are pragmatic states. Do you envisage a convergence of America and Russia either against Islam or against China? Because Islam is an empire which exists as an idea but not as an actuality. And you say in those countries which have the memory of former greatness, like Turkey, this germ remains in place to germinate the concept of empire. For instance, the late Dr. Hani Esayek, whose father was hanged by Saddam, said to me once, in Iraq we only have one dua, and it is, "Oh God, send us back the Ottoman Empire." So there is the possibility of two scenarios. A scenario of a capitalist Russia allied with a capitalist America against an ideological state like the Khilafah, a revived Islamic empire, or also against China, because Russia is very afraid of China. Perhaps
and
more afraid of China.
Excuse me, but you know what do you say now? You say that from the other side, on the other pole of this logic, China will have to support the Khilafah, because it is the single way for China to survive.
You are phrasing in another way what Huntington says, that he envisages a coalition between the Islamic forces of the Middle East with the Confucian societies. Now this on the surface may appear impossible, but because they are so distinct and far apart geographically and politically, but it is nevertheless conceivable, because forgetting about communism, which has proved to be a transitional stage in the development of Western society, is now repudiated because it is admitted that communism does not work. It may be that a convergence can take place between Islam and the Confucian order of the Far East, because both of these are deans. Christianity is not a dean.
Any collaboration on the ideological level between Islam and Confucian society, it's excluded from the very beginning, because Confucian society is the ugly thing, absolutely unacceptable in the Islamic eyes. But there is a pragmatic point of view. For example, China has its own project to boost its existence up in the hierarchy. Yes, it's the New Silk Way. New Silk Way suggests 12 Islamic states being invested with $4 trillion of the Chinese treasures that were collected by the toil of the Chinese workers and peasants, and $4 trillion invested in the Eurasian countries, in the Islamic countries. Who will defend these investments? Who will ensure these investments are not just lost in the entropy, in thefts, and so on and so on? The authority, not an authority of Islam Karimov, not an authority of Assad, Astaghfirullah, not an authority of Ilham Aliyev, an authority of Khilafah, who had united all the Muslim masses, about 1 billion human beings in this mass of, earth and sea, earth and sea, Mackinder.
I'm glad you mentioned Mackinder.
Yeah.
Although the name that is most connected with geopolitics is not Mackinder, who was British, but Karl Haushofer. And we must remember that Karl Haushofer lived in Japan and may have been initiated into an esoteric Buddhist sect, and may have been a member of the Black Dragon Society that so worried, and Green Dragon Society that so obsessed the United States during the Second World War. The whole concept of Mackinder and Haushofer rests on the centrality of autarky. Now, people believe that the Second World War broke out when Germany invaded Poland on the 1st of September 1939, and Britain declared war on Germany on my birthday, the 3rd of September 1939. But in reality, that war did not begin then. It began in
Japan invading China.
No, yes, that was the Pacific War. And I don't believe it had to do with the invasion of China either. But just let me expound on this.
Okay.
I think that the Second World War really began in 1934 with the publication of Germany's 4-year plan, in which Goering defined autarky as Germany's economic goal. Now, an autarkic state means that one does not depend on foreign loans to exist, to operate your economy. This infuriated the bankers, who are the real rulers.
Before that, Mussolini talked about attack.
Yes, also. Now, in my view, also, the Pacific War did not begin in 1940 with or 41 with the attack on Pearl Harbor. It began with the Washington Conference in 1920, in which America detached Britain from her Far Eastern ally, Japan, which had fought on the British side in the First World War and got next to nothing out of it. But that was not the reason. America wanted to control the whole Pacific Basin. They already controlled China through the missionaries. I mean, let's face it, China, the first president of China, when the empire system was overthrown, was a Christian, Dr. Sun Yat-sen. His daughter married Chiang Kai-shek, who was also a product of the missionaries. They were all products of mission schools. Even Mao Zedong was a creation of the missionaries. These people were all Methodists. So that China was, by the 1920s and 1930s, an American vassal state. All her industries, even the railways, were foreign owned. China herself owned nothing. So Mao Zedong, to this degree, was correct. Now, when at the Washington Conference in 1920, America, coveting hegemony over the entire Pacific Basin, detached Britain from her Far Eastern ally, then that was the point at which the Pacific War really began, with a reversal of positions in which Britain, by 1941, when her gold reserves ran out, she became an economic satellite of the United States.
Well, it's I call that an abysmal difference between the scientists of history and the pragmatical analysts who analyze the actual events.
Let's go on to another aspect of Haushofer's philosophy. Haushofer's idea was he who controls the world island controls the world. What is the world island? It is Europe and Asia. Because what is Europe? Geographically, it is just a peninsula of Asia. So the link between Europe, Western civilization, and the Confucian cultures of the Far East is in fact the Silk Road, and specifically Islam, the Islamic empire which covered the whole area in between. Therefore, Islam is in fact poised to dominate the world.
You know what? I think the attraction, the attractive thing you may show to Chinese to induce them into this project is the proposal to defend the new Silk Way for them to connect with Europe. And so the market of Caliphate is twice as big as the European Union, 1 billion human beings instead of 500 million. And it is all that Chinese are interested in. I visited China, I know them. It's the animals absolutely without any spiritual dimension, I tell you. So they think only in terms of absolute pragmatism, without a shade of romanticism, spirit, symbolism, and so on. But they need it practically. But if it were really so, as it seems, yes, the union between the Islamic world and China, it were the unholy union between, a dove and a snake. Yeah, and personally I believe that China will have historically to die, because it is a subject to impossibly strong inner tensions between various parts, and the upper classes and the lowest classes. It is doomed to perish in the new civil war, and it makes me optimistic about the proposal to support the caliphate and the new legitimacy, because without this support in the first 1, 2, 3 years, we cannot establish the subject that could stand upon his own legs, yes, facing the West, who denies the legitimacy.
So on this positive, optimistic note, we end.
Yeah, I think so. Thank you, Dr. Yaqub Zaki.